right, and off we go. So welcome everyone. We are going to be creating this snowman, and the use of salt is needed. So you can use coarse salt or table salt. The difference is really just that it'll do the same thing. You see that texture that happens in the background, that's the salt. And if you use table salt, this is coarse salt. The table salt, it'll just be a lot finer and you'll actually get more texture. So it looks pretty neat. So either one is fine. It's okay if you don't have the coarse salt. So, but first we are going to get started using our pencil. So this is 9x12 watercolor paper. And I'm going to go in a little bit closer here. And we're going to get started with drawing it. So I'm going to move it up here a little bit so that you can see my paper. And move this up as well. Okay, so we are going to start at the top. As you can see, he is the full length of our paper. So we're going to start with his hat, and I'm just going to move this up just a little more. I'm trying to get him right next to me here. I'm going to move. I seem to have two watercolor paints over here for some reason, two palettes. Okay, so starting at the top, we're going to start with his hat. And so his hat is a little bit tilted, just very slightly. So we've got the top of it. I'm going to move in a little closer so you can see that line. And just a reminder that you want to be drawing lightly. I draw darker so you can see it. And so we've got, kind of a boxy hat. And then we have the brim that is definitely not straight. It is sort of tilted there. And so we're going to make that brim look like this. And then we're going to start with his face. I'll let everybody get caught up just in case I went a little too fast there. I'm going to make his hat just a little bit taller here. Top. Looking at my other one, realizing that his hat is going almost all the way up to the top, and I didn't have it like that. So I just want to fix that. Okay, and we'll go back and do the details. But now we want to create our snowman head. And so we have a little bit of the lip of the hat. So we're going to kind of start here, and then we're going to go across so that there's now a brim. And we're going to be making another part of the back of the hat right here, so you can extend that part. Or you can make this line a little bit above, just because this is going to be the other side of the back of the hat. You'll see as soon as we start to make his head. And we're going to do that now. So make this a little darker. All right. So his head is going to start about right here. And it's kind of roundish. And the end of his face ends here, but he's got a little bit of a, there's a little bit of a point right here. Not incredibly pointy, but just a little bit since it's the side of his face. Kind of like his cheek. So kind of like that a little bit. And then we're going to make the rest of his body. But first, we're going to make his scarf. And you are always welcome to do something different with the details. And I know some of you do. Also, I forgot to mention for those that are that follow along with my newsletter, a new newsletter will finally be out tomorrow. I apologize. This is my busy time of finishing up creating programs, new programs for you all, sending out to the library. So, and I was telling Karen, somehow this month has just gotten even busier. And I think I knew that a few months ago, but didn't realize the impact of some extra things that happen during this time of year. Like I was saying, I have an art birthday party on Sunday that I'm teaching. And I know there's some other things. I just can't think of them right now. So as you see, and let me move him in a little bit. I just realized he's kind of off camera here. So what you want to do is after you start the scarf part, you can make his body go all the way down. And I'm going to move my camera one more time to the side so you can see everything here. Hold on. There we go. Couldn't get a grip on my gooseneck here. So all the way down to the bottom. And then also on the other side, you're also going to go from the scarf down to the bottom as well. Let me make that a little darker. And then we're going to start off with our details. So we have a very basic shape of our snowman with a hat and a scarf. We're also going to make the rest of the scarf. So we'll start off with that detail. I also forgot to mention, I have spotlighted the video. So please make sure that you are on, that you're not on speaker, that you are on speaker view, not on gallery view. That way you can see it. All right, so we have his little scarf here folded over, kind of swinging in the wind here. So I'm going to make that. And then you can erase the line that is from the underneath part of the scarf. And then we've got the other side of the scarf here too. I'm making mine a little bit different. Like so. Okay. I'm just fixing his little face for a second. All right. Now, as I mentioned, the rest of our details, we're going to come back up to the hat and we're going to make some berries on the side here. I have about 5 berries here, but you can do as you wish. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and we've got 1 to balance on top. And then we have a holly leaf. So he's kind of festive. Okay. And then we are going to go to the right side of his face because he is turned. And so we're going to start with his eyes. And so over here, So remember, this is the side of his face. So there's a lot of space over here. So his eye would actually start about right here. And so we're going to give him sort of a button eye. And I like to make, a little round dot for the glimmer. And you know what? I'm going to move it over actually, because I want to leave room for his nose. I want a little more room for his nose. So about right here. And you can do it lightly at first, just so you make sure you have room for his nose, because then you're going to create his carrot nose. It's going to stick out like this. And so once you feel like, okay, there's enough room for his carrot nose, on the other side is going to be his eye. And it is slightly smaller in size because it's a little farther away from us. And then I like to sort of make his mouth like this. And I usually make, a bit of a rosy cheek, but I will leave that alone. And we'll just paint that in when we get there. And then our last part before we get to paint is going to be his buttons. So he's got 3 buttons. And again, those are closer to this side because he's turned. So we'll start with one, and we're gonna start with what looks like an oval. And we're gonna make it look 3-dimensional by then going inside of it like so. And I'm gonna make my buttons just a little bit thicker. All right, and then we've got the second one. And finally, the third one. You can also make it this way. If you were looking up, I made it so that I made the outside on its own over here instead of just, going inside the cylinder like I just told you. So there's 2 ways to make his buttons. And it just depends on, sometimes if you want a little thicker, you make it the second way I just showed. I'm just kind of fixing his buttons now because I like him to have some kind of thick buttons. And take a once over look over your snowman. Sometimes I like to make him a little bigger, a little wider over here. I like him to be a kind of a wide snowman. So I'm going to extend the body line a little bit out to here. Just a preference. All right, and then at this time, if you are satisfied with everything, you now want to make sure that your lines are nice and light, because our next step is going to be creating the background. So and the rest of him, but we're going to start off with the background. I just want to erase this eye here. So erase any lines that you see that don't belong, especially because we're using the white of the paper for a lot of the snow on him. I mean, we're still using colors, obviously, but it is a much lighter watercolor. So I am erasing or lightening up my lines. All right. So it's great to have two brushes if you have them. I have a larger one. This actually says it's a size 11, which I think is really large for, I wouldn't have thought this was an 11, but it is. I always say the confusing thing is different companies, there's not a set, sort of way to tell the sizes, but this company, this is an 11, and then this one is a smaller one. What is that? That's a 4. So I have an 11 and a 4, and you can see the difference. This one they're both round. That's what we want. This one's for detail. This one is for the larger parts, like for the background and the hat, that sort of thing. So we're going to start off with the larger one. And again, it doesn't have to be an 11. It can just be larger. And I'm now going to go closer. I also want to say, so at this point, what we're going to do is, for those of you that have never used salt with watercolor, what we do is we have to make sure that our background is very wet. So what we're going to do first is we're going to actually pre-wet our paper, and then we're going to add our color, which is going to be blue. You can use purple and blue if you want. It doesn't have to just be blue. It can be pink or reddish, whatever. But you're going to first wet your background. So you're going to pre-wet it, and then you're going to add the color, and then right away you're going to add the salt. So it's got to be wet in order for the salt to activate. So I just dipped my larger brush in my water, and I'm now painting with water the background. The salt is kind of messy, so you do want to make sure that you have your table or whatever area you're using, best to have it covered with something. I also, for me, because I have carpeting, I use a flat box to actually put this in afterward when we shake off, because basically what happens is we shake off the salt after it dries. So just so you know. You definitely want to have a trash can nearby because it gets messy. Okay, so if you can see mine, it is pretty wet. And now I'm going to add my blue. And I just used blue for the background. As I mentioned, oh no, I got some on him. Well, he's gonna be blue anyway, for the most part. As I mentioned, you can use, different colors. This is called the wet on wet technique. Pre-wetting the area first. We usually don't do in my classes a wet on wet technique sometimes, but for the most part, I tend to use water as we're painting. You can add more water as you're going along, or more paint to make it a little darker. But because we're trying to get this, to be kind of snowy and watery, not real dark blue unless you really want it that way. I started off with, the wet on wet technique. If you want it lighter, you use less paint. As you can see, I'm doing that right here, just to give it a little bit of a lighter spot. I like to go a little darker, right up against him. That's just my prerogative. If you want to do the same, you can. You want to make sure that you have your paper towels nearby. The water, if you're not used to using the wet on wet technique, the water can sometimes kind of go every which way. And when you have everything covered, I like to put the salt in my hand. And it doesn't have to be a ton, but the more you use, the more textured it will be. But you're pretty much going to sprinkle it all over. And you're going to let that sit while we do the other parts. And just take your time. I'm just going a little faster just so that I can show you a little bit what it looks like. You're probably also going to get some on your snowman, and that's okay because we want that. Check and see how everybody's doing. Nice. Everybody looks busy. Oh, Daniel's coming in. Hello.
Hi.
I'm sorry if you were waiting and I didn't see you.
No, Reese stepped on my computer.
It is always the dogs or cats, right? That's funny. I mean, it's not as funny when it happens, but it's a little funny. We are going to let this sit for a little bit. I'm going to, and you can take your time with it, with adding the color. But once you add the salt, you're going to see that it's going to start to activate, which is pretty neat. It gets pretty bumpy, and what the salt is doing is it is soaking up the color, because it's attracted to the water, and the color comes with it. And so you're going to get this sort of snowflake effect. And I do like to kind of move some of, it's okay to get it on your snowman. We're actually going to add a little bit on our snowman anyway, but you might want to move some of it off of that part just a little bit so that you can paint. I mean, you can still paint with salt, but definitely a little messy. I'm just moving a little bit because I do want to get some on, we want to get some on our snowman as well. So wait for everybody to kind of catch up. I see that there's some people painting. We're going to let this sit for about 5 minutes before we start our next, we start to paint. So if you want to grab a beverage or use the facilities or a snack, whatever, feel free to do it. I'm just moving off some of the salt. I'm just taking this opportunity to clean off my palette. I've been using my watercolors quite a bit with doing programs, and I haven't been cleaning them because we are going to mix some purple and blue for the bottom portion of our snowman. You also want to think about what color for the scarf if you're not going to do red. I use red for the scarf. But if you want to use another color, you can use green. You can use, if you have a darker blue, I guess that wouldn't be too bad. So I'm going to show mine up close for a second because you can start to see in this corner here that it's starting to kind of activate there. It's neat. Okay, I'm going to shake off some of it. It's on the non-snowman part. Just a little bit so that we can get started with the rest. So the part, you're welcome to do the same. If you want to, shake off some parts and that, maybe the parts where we're going to do the snowman, you can. We're going to add a little bit of salt to that too. And it's okay if there's some left over. So it's your choice, but we are going to now start on our snowman face. So I like to continue to use my bigger brush. Let me make sure I'm still in the view here. Okay, I know I was moving around quite a bit. All right, so I'm going to go even closer now. No, that's better. Okay. All right, so his face is also the blue and white. So basically what I do is I take, this is more like almost a turquoise type blue. Even though it looks like regular blue in Crayola, it comes out more, I think, like almost like a turquoise-ish. So we're going to take that and we're going to go right up against the brim of his hat underneath and then around his face as well. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to add water and push the color out to this side of his face so that it looks like there's a little more shadowing on the left side here. So let's do that. So just a little bit of water. And we've got this one. And this one we don't really, I didn't really mix. I just put it straight on. And I'm just kind of outlining. So you should kind of have something like that. And then you're going to dip in your water, and I like to tap it a little bit on my paper towel before I put it on my snowman. But then, and you should have a little bit of the blue in your brush already. You can kind of see how there's a little bit of the light blue. But then what we're going to do is, because we have some water on our brush, we're going to go right up to the blue that we used all across the top of his head and also the bottom and side. And you're going to take your water and just kind of pull from it a little bit, but still leave that kind of darkened blue line. And you're going to start pushing it towards sort of his eye area, his forehead. So basically on the left side of his face, the bottom and the top. You can go a little bit down also next to his eye over here. So we're just giving him a little bit of color with this blue. I do go onto his mouth and cheek area as well. And if you need to add a little more blue, you can. So I just went into my palette and I'm adding a little more. I also want it to be a little bit darker here, the shading to be a little darker. So I just added a little more. So I'm getting little pieces of salt on my brush, and that's okay. You can either wash it off in your water or, just kind of put up with it. It'll give it some texture. This piece is all about texture, so a little more blue here. And we'll come back and add, a little bit darker. Now, once you do that, you're also going to go into the body as well. And you're going to add blue, but you're also going to add purple. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to grab more of our blue. And again, I'm using that bigger brush. And I'm going to go to the side here, the left side, down his body. And I'm going to kind of outline again. I outline on the left side and then right underneath the scarf on both sides. And we're going to go toward the buttons as well. And you're going to be using water to make it a little lighter, make the blue lighter, because remember, this is snow. He's a snowman. And so we don't want it to be completely blue. We just want a blue tinge, but we're also going to be adding purple on top of all this. And then we're going to add some salt. Your background should be looking really neat right now. It should be kind of crystallizing in parts. So I'm taking the blue and I'm just adding a little bit on the right side around the buttons as well. Maybe a little darker here on the left. But again, we've got a lot of water. and then you're going to add purple to that mix. Mostly, I like to add purple on the left side of his body on top of the blue, like this, and up at the top where the scarf is on either side. So I just mix it right in, and then you're going to throw salt on it. Doesn't have to be a whole lot of salt, it can just be a little bit. So I'm going to grab my salt. Kids love this too. If you want to redo this with a kiddo, a grandkid, a niece, a nephew, salt is fun. Messy, but fun. I always suggest absolutely laying down some ground rules with the salt. Remember, I did something like this with my niece years ago. I mean, she's 12 now, but at the time she was 5, yeah, 5 or 6, and she kept eating the salt. I was like, that cannot taste good. I could see if it was sugar, but salt, I don't know. It was eye-opening. I did not think she was going to go for the salt. So your snowman should be pretty salty right now. The bottom part, the background, well, on his body should probably be a little bit less, a little bit less salt. You can also, move along the color a little bit if you want to. And again, it's okay. You're going to be moving along the salt that you put down too. You could just rinse it off. After this, you do want to make sure to rinse out your brushes very well, clean them out very well. The salt, I mean, it will melt eventually. Okay, and with our background, you want to double check. There might be parts of it now that are dry enough where you can start wiping off the salt. So again, this is with your background, and I suggest doing it with a dry brush, another brush, not the ones that you're using, but maybe even an older brush or a brush you don't care about. It's okay if it's not one of those, because you'll wash the brush eventually anyway, but you want a dry brush. That seems to be easier. I mean, you could wipe it off with your fingers, but it's easier to do it with a brush. And so you want to have a trash can or a trash bag nearby, because what you're going to be doing is first you're going to lift up your art, you're going to start to tilt it into the trash can, and you're going to have salt that comes off of it. But then you'll have salt that's still hanging on, that's still clinging. That's the stuff that you want to take your brush and kind of start to move off. So I will show you that. Let me grab my other brush. I got a trash bag here. We'll see how this goes. So, okay, so let's see if I can do this so that you can see it. So I'm going to put it on my I'm going to kind of put it on my floor and my stool, and I'm going to move my camera so you can kind of see what I'm doing here. Okay, so here is my trash bag. And at first I'm gonna, you can hear the salt kind of going into the trash bag here. I'm gonna shake a little more off. And then you can see that a lot of it is still clinging on. So now I'm going to use my brush. And I have, let's see. So my trick is I use sort of an old lid of a box. Again, this is just for future use. And I put, it's just the right size, in the future. And then I start to take off the salt this way. But again, you can just do this in a trash can. I just don't have a trash can completely nearby. I have a trash bag. So you can start to see the salt coming off. And then you just rub it off to the rest of it with you, sort of like your fingertips or a paper towel. So you're going to be rubbing it off, shaking it off, and pushing it off, brushing it off. You'll be able to feel if it's still on there, obviously, because it'll be grainy. Some people like to, I've seen this, they like to use the leftover colored salt to do another project with, but I've never done that. I've just seen it on like online or something. Interesting idea, but I gotta say I throw mine away. If it gets, it gets everywhere as it is. So now I'm just taking my finger because I can feel parts of it still on there. You want to make sure to get almost all of it off at this point. But you can see, it looks really lovely with the pattern it kind of makes. It's just a process. And again, you can use a paper towel, like a little piece of a paper towel or a scrunched up paper towel to get the rest off. But I find the best is really my fingers after using the brush originally to kind of get it off. And then just do a once over with your fingers and your hands. And you might want to make sure your workspace is salt free at this point too. You can clean that up a little bit before we proceed to our last few steps here. And I'm still giving you time. I'm just mentioning, I always have to clean up my workspace because it kind of gets everywhere. So I'm going to take this and dump it. And then I'm going to clean off my workspace before we start our next step here. I'm always really excited to especially see, how projects like this turn out because the salt, has a kind of a mind of its own and it looks neat with everybody's, it looks unique with everybody's. I'm going to grab a paper towel, I think, push everything down, all the remaining salt. And I just like to have another, a clean workspace to put your paper down again once we start doing the rest. It's okay if you don't get it all up at this time. These are really fun for doing, background, the sky, any kind of, anytime you want some texture. And of course, especially winter landscapes. I've done it with forest, kind of foresty landscapes. That's neat too. All right, so when you are relatively salt-free and your space is relatively salt-free, although I feel like salt is like glitter. You're just gonna find it. You're gonna vacuum, you're gonna think you found it all, and it's gonna turn up. But what you should have at this point is a very textured background and snowman or snowwoman, whatever. And this is where, if you want to darken up some spots, you are welcome to do that right now before we start back on, the skin, or not the skin, but the snow skin, I guess. I'm just going to move some of this color down. I want to lighten it up a little bit here. But you can add some, I like to go back and just add some darker areas right around him, kind of like outlining around the hat. And of course, it's not going to look as textured, but that's okay. So I'm just adding a little bit darker blue here. Okay, and then we are going to add the first layer to his hat. So basically, with his hat, we do first a very light kind of color of black, so that it looks kind of grayish. And then we'll go back and we're going to dry brush this part of his hat. So the first part of his hat is using either black, or if you have gray, depending on what set you're using. I'm just using Crayola. And so first layer is, we just want to cover the top hat part with sort of a lightish gray, but I use black for that because Crayola black is very light, at least when you use it with water. We're going to go and use it afterward with more of the pigment. As you can see, you know, a lighter application to the brim and the top hat section. Like so. You're also going to apply that same color to the buttons at first. So you can take that kind of grayish and apply it all over the buttons. We will go back and also darken that up. I'm just doing it right now with my larger brush, and then we'll go back with the smaller brush, but we're just adding our layers on for right now. And they're quick layers. They're not like multiple layers. They're just two. And we also have 2 layers on the scarf. So again, so far what we have is we have the first layer on the hat. You can see that it's on the top part of the hat and then also the brim, but not on these sections because we're going to do those darker since that's underneath his head. And then we just added the black or gray to the buttons. So that's what we have so far. And now we're going to add a layer of red to the scarf. And again, just kind of a lighter, not a lighter layer, but sort of, I'm just going to make it a little darker over here. Background. Okay. So then when you are ready, I gotta clean out my red. I was bad and double dipped earlier. But so you're going to use red for the first layer of your scarf. And then we're going to do a dry brush technique on the scarf as well. I do like to kind of outline the scarf along the bottom and the top part of the scarf. As you can see, my water is running a little bit over here. The scarf is a little bit purpley on the underside of this part, but you'll be able to see that once I do it. So I'm gonna outline it first. I also, if you notice, I did not draw in the other parts of the scarf that are kind of hanging off. I just do that with my brush. And fill in the scarf. Again, I'm going to kind of outline a little bit around the edges, and then I fill in the middle. And you can make certain parts, again, a little darker. Like I like to go right underneath the neck and make it a little darker. Again, I kind of like to do an outline where it's a little darker at the bottom of the scarf and the top of the scarf. And then when we go back and add our dry brushing, that'll be a little darker too. And you can switch to your smaller brush now if you feel more comfortable with it when we are doing the scarf. You know, or you can stick with the bigger brush, whatever you feel comfortable with. Uh, and once you have your scarf done, we can now go to, we're going to go to the cheeks and we're going to go to the nose. So we're going to do everything else around while we're waiting for the scarf to dry, and your hat should be pretty dry. And your buttons should be pretty dry. But so now let's go to the cheeks. So I like to use a little bit of orange and red mixed together to get kind of like a blush. Let me put my paper towel underneath it so you can see. All right, so let me dry off this one section since I had black there. All right, so again, I'm going to add some red and just a little bit of orange and get kind of a cheeky. I'm going to put it kind of a little bit lightly, slightly watered down on his cheeks, underneath his eyes there, and then one kind of underneath his little carrot nose there. So he's a little rosy. And then we're going to mix yellow and then orange and red for his nose. The yellow is going to go on the tip of his nose, and the orange and red are going to go toward this side. So I like to start off with yellow. And again, you can switch to, I'm going to go in really close now. So again, I'm using yellow for the tip, and I'm using a lot of color. I'm not making it very watercolor-like. I'm using the tip of my brush. And then I'm going to add orange, almost like a kind of like a rainbow effect. And then red is going to go on the end. But I'm going to also mix that with some orange so that it's not just red. I want it to be like a little bit of an orangey red. And you can kind of push that color into the carrot so that you kind of get a gradient effect. Orange here. Sometimes I do a little outlining on the end. I just kind of want to show you that. We're also going to add red to cheek color. Yes, cheek color is a combination of orange and red. And then you lighten it up with some water so it kind of gets to be a pink. If you have pink, you can use like a pink. I add a little bit of orange to kind of make it not so pinky, but um you don't have to. We also want to do the berries with red up at the top of his hat. So I, at this point, just take the tip of my brush here and painting some cranberries or holly berries, I guess. I guess they're not cranberries. And I like to leave a little bit of a white dot in each of them just so they look shiny. And then our holly is green, and I like to kind of make it, basically green. Sometimes I add a little bit of yellow. Yes, the nose color. So the nose color, it is yellow on the tip, and then it goes orange and red as it gets toward his face. And then I kind of pull the orangey red into the rest of it. I want to darken up a little more um, over here. Oh, whoops, I used my green. I forgot I had green on there. Whoops. Oh no, he's got a bit of a green nose now. Sorry, Frosty. Here we go. I fixed it with a little bit. I'll have to let that dry. But you want to get your holly. You can add a little bit of yellowish to your green in your holly. Just to get a little bit of dimension there. We'll wait for that to dry a little bit too to go back. But so we're going to let those dry, but we can now do some dry brushing using our black with the hat. And what I mean by that is that your brush should be slightly wet, but not soaking. And then you're really going to use the tip of your brush. So you can use your water on your brush in order to get the paint on the tip, but you just want it on the tip because we're going to use it like ink. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to fill in underneath the hat to make that darker on the left side and the right side. So there's the left. I do like to make it a little bit darker, closer to um, the snowman, and then this part just slightly lighter by adding a little bit of water. So I'm going to leave that space there so it looks kind of like a triangle. And in the meantime, you can also paint the eyes. Now you can switch to your smaller brush. There's his one eye. And I'm going to do his other one here. So I like to kind of outline it at first. I also outline, the white glimmer so that I can paint around it. So it kind of looks like that. And then I'm going to fill it in. The other thing you're going to do while you have this dark on your brush, you're also going to make the outlines for his mouth. So we're really doing everything at this point, um, except for the dry brushing of the hat. I'm going to do that last. So you're going to do his mouth, and then also you're going to outline his buttons. And I like to do the side of his buttons a little bit shaded after that. Just take your time. So if you outline his buttons, then you can go back and, wet your brush just ever so slightly to make around his buttons a little bit lighter, well, a little bit darker, but not as dark as you had it with the, how we were kind of doing it like ink. I like to add a little bit on his buttons too. A little bit of shading. On the round part. And then last but not least, we're going to dry brush his hat. And so basically what that means is, going in as if, we're going to use it almost like ink, right? You can wet it very slightly. But basically what you want is you want your brush to be dryish with the color on it so that when you move it across, and you can tap it on your paper towel, and then you're going to start to slide it from left to right, and you're going to see that it's going to skip color. You can move back and forth too with the brush. You want it to be darkest on the left side of the hat, so you can kind of keep filling that in. And then you're going to keep going. You're going to do the same. And I'm kind of lightly touching the paper, going back and forth. And you may just have to keep adding, more black. And you can do it with your, again, smaller brush or combination of both. And then this is kind of where I start to I do a little bit of outlining on the outside of the hat so that it sticks out a little bit. Some people find this a little easier too with a flat brush. So if you have a flat brush, you can use that too. That means the end is, flat. But I just used this brush when I did it. And you're going to do the same thing on the stripes of your scarf, but in red. So let me outline his hat. So remember to outline the part of his hat, part of the brim where it's closest to, the snow, so that there's a difference. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to go to my scarf here. I'm going to dry brush stripes on top. So again, I just get just enough to make stripes on top of the red that I've already done. And you don't want to forget about his little, the scraggly ends of the scarf. You can now make those too. I like to add just a bit of some blue or purple right underneath to kind of shade a little bit on the underside of the scarf here. You can even do it right underneath um his neck if you want. A little bit of shadow. I didn't do that in my other one, but kind of looks like it might be good here. Here. Just to add a little bit of shading. But again, you don't have to. I can't wait to see what everybody's looks like. So I'm going to stop the recording and I'm going to remove my spotlight. So let me stop that recording.